New developments in the Idaho murder case. Moscow police are asking for the public's help in tracking down the driver of a white 2011 to 2013 Hyundai Elantra with unknown plates. Why? Car was reportedly near the victim's home in the early morning hours when the crime took place. What does it mean? Let's discuss with people who know how to do the job. Former NYPD Sergeant Joe Giacalone and retired FBI profiler and special agent Jim Clemente. It's good to have both of you guys back. Thank you.
Thanks, Evan.
All right, so let's start with Jim. What does this mean about the car? There had been some scrutiny about they should have gotten the car sooner. What does this mean, that they just saw it there and that's it?
Well, it could be. It could mean that we have some potential witnesses here, or this could be the vehicle that the offender used. Either one of those things is a real possibility, and both of them make it very important.
Now, without condemning anybody, okay, because that's not what this is about, but there is something that is becoming more and more nagging, and not just to me, but obviously to one of the victim's fathers. They cleared this guy in the food truck video. I'll remind people that the two of the girls who were killed went to a food truck after they were out one night before they went home. I'll put that video up so people can remember it. There was a guy there that they interacted with. People who have enhanced the videos say that one of the girls wound up telling him to F off, whether it was joking around or not. He's there, he doesn't eat, and then he is seen following them when they leave. And there's been a lot of subsequent reporting, Joe, I'll go to you first on this, about who he was and if he's the same guy who lives across the street and all these different details about him. And then we find out that this guy was cleared. What does it mean to clear somebody, and when it happens that early on?
It doesn't mean really anything. I mean, the police can say that this person's cleared, that person's cleared, but it's not a get out of jail free card. It's not like they can't turn around tomorrow and say, you know what, here's a pair of handcuffs for you. So a lot of times, listen, the police department knows a lot more that's going on than the general public, and sometimes they say things to keep everyone at ease, including the suspect or suspects in a case like this. And it's not unusual for them to do it.
I'm with you. I get that kind of game, but Jim, then the guy leaves the country. I mean, wouldn't you do something to, like, keep somebody like that around? People keep saying, should have taken DNA. Nobody who has a lawyer is going to let you take DNA from them if they're not charged with something. But what do you make of that?
Well, the fact that he left the country, you have to look at when he bought those tickets. I mean, is this something his family planned for many months, or is this something that happened just at the last minute? That's what's critically important. If the family actually lives here and they have plans to return here, I don't think it was such a mistake to let him go, because they obviously didn't have enough to keep him if he is even a suspect.
Who do you think they're looking for, Jim?
It's just part of the process.
Who do you think they're looking for? What kind of guy do you think they're looking for from what you've learned?
Well, I mean, basically, we're looking for generally somebody who is probably a white male who's in his 20s or 30s, somebody who's familiar with that area, somebody who has freedom of movement late at night, into the early hours of the morning, somebody who I believe either had some kind of relationship with one or more of those victims in that house, or he was stalking one or more of those victims in the house. But there is a relationship between him and that house. Because, frankly, this is an extremely high-risk crime. This is not something that just anybody could pull off, and he had to have some connection in order to get away with this.
When you say that this is high risk, why?
Well, it's somebody entering an occupied dwelling with 6 adults, any of whom could have had another knife, a gun, or a camera, or a phone, or a way to attack him. In other words, when you're planning a crime, and believe me, mass crimes, mass murders like this are typically planned. When you're planning a crime, you want to make sure that you have the highest probability of actually accomplishing it and getting away. And I think in order to do that, he had to know their schedules. He had to know that they were probably drunk or sound asleep by the time he came into that house.
Hey, thank you for watching. Please go to newsnationnow.com, newsnationnow.com, and you can find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button down below. Then you will get more of NewsNation's fact-driven coverage.